And we're live.
Woohoo! As I choke on a piece of Toblerone.
So, hope everybody's doing well this evening. Excuse the different perspective.
Are we recording on the tablet at all?
No. This works.
This works? Okay.
That's us. It's very bright. Oh. Mute that. There we go. Muted.
Woohoo!
All right. But yeah. Good evening, everybody.
No.
Hope,
No.
Hope everybody's doing well. Nico.
Nico does not, well, he's inspecting the new tower that's resting everything upon it.
He was sleeping. Was.
And then we went live.
And now we're live, and now he's not sleeping. And now he's looking to see what kind of trouble he can get into.
Yeah.
You gotta say hi, Una?
I want my pillow. I want my lap.
There's lap space all over the place. But, yeah, so, here it is, 8:30. Time to go.
Yes, because we have a long script tonight.
We have a long script tonight, but do want to say good evening, everybody. Happy Monday. Hope that you have been doing well these last couple of weeks.
Happy Spooky Boo Week, because you better be treating your boo. It's the only way I'm going to acknowledge this holiday. Boo.
Okay. Anyways, we do have a special tour on that day of which we will really not speak. It's Wednesday.
Special tour on Wednesday.
Special tour on Wednesday. It's going to be a slightly tweaked version of our Churchill Chillers tour, which we are calling An Arrow to the Heart. So, it is going to feature not only our classic, many of our classic Churchill stories, but also some other also romantic ghostly tales from across Richmond as well. So, Lee is going to be giving that tour. Unfortunately, Lee could not join us tonight. But
well, it's wet outside. We don't need Lee walking up here.
Yeah, but in any case, Lee's giving that tour. Looking forward to it, and yeah, hope that you maybe can join us for that. Other than that, we have tours going just about every night over the next week. So, going to be keeping busy out there, haunting Richmond as we do.
Yes.
But aside from that, no real dramatic news over the last couple of weeks.
No.
We've had a few tours here and there, you know.
It's been quiet for once.
It's February. February's typically kind of a low-key month for us. We've been getting a little bit of rest and stuff like that, which is maybe a little too much rest, I might say. I feel kind of zombified almost, which I don't know. It is what it is.
Benson's here to, block me completely and take over, so.
Come here, buddy.
No, you're going first.
Oh, I'm going first?
Because
okay.
I'm not in the camera.
Fair enough. So, but good evening, Patrick. Glad to have you all here. And
Hi, Mom.
And hey, Rick, how are you?
Yes, your mom was popped down for a wee bit.
Oh, hi, Mom. But, yes, so, and Sasha? Friend of Patrick's, thank you for tuning in. But yeah, glad to have you all here. So tonight we are here to chat about haunted Missouri. Missouri. Now, I will say, this is, there's a lot.
There's a lot.
A lot in Missouri. So we have tonight's script, which is going to be a little long, so we won't diddle-daddle too long on this. But let's just say that we basically have basically enough material for 2 more haunted Missouri scripts.
And I just scratched the surface.
Just scratching the surface. So we have a lot going on here. And hi, Debbie, first-time watcher. Glad to have you here. But yeah, so but yes. Hi, everybody.
Yes.
But yeah, so we got Una here, Vincent.
And I got Nico.
Nico's down over here, and Lulu was around. Maybe she'll come back around again eventually. But in any case, Missouri.
Yes.
So, as the gateway to the west and positioned along the Mississippi River, the state of Missouri stands at the crossroads of American history. From the earliest days of the indigenous people to the fiercely contested colonial era to the great westward expansion and to the modern era, Missouri has faced it all, and then some. Tonight we'll take a look at some of the more haunting chapters of the Show Me State and why the spirits of so many still linger on in this land at the heart of the country. So,
is that where Show Me the Money comes from?
No. Oh.
I know that's Jerry Maguire, but...
Well, yes.
I just...
You had to ask because now it's going to bug me. I know why it was, and now I'm blanking.
Well, you can look it up.
I'll have to look it up when I hand this back
Or
over
Patrick,
to you.
who's our wonderful Googler.
Yes, but the Show Me State. Why is Missouri the Show Me State? If nobody else gets to it first, I'll circle back. But in the meantime, I do have the first stories for tonight as Beth keeps...
I derailed.
As Beth keeps Mr. Nico entertained over here off to the side. I didn't know Rick was born and raised in Springfield. So, very cool. I don't think we have any Springfield stories tonight.
No, they didn't make it to this cut.
Nope, but there are other stories, and I'm sure we will be swinging back through Missouri again at a later date. But for tonight, here's what we have. And we're going to start in the heart of Missouri, where the prairie meets the Ozark Mountains, and where we find Benton County. Now, this is a sparsely populated landscape that is the embodiment of rural Midwestern life. This area first provided plentiful game along its waterways and hills to several Indian tribes, including the Osage, the Delaware, and the Shawnee. European settlers first came to this area in 1719, and by the early 1800s, hunters, trappers, and traders were frequenting the region. By 1820, farmers of English, Irish, and German descent called the area home. In January of 1835, Benton County was officially formed and commissioners were appointed to situate a new county seat as close to the center of the county as possible, eventually settling on the growing community of Warsaw. Despite founding a county government, the next several decades would be tumultuous for Benton County. A bloody family feud known as the Slicker War took place among some of the residents, and the Civil War struck deep rifts in the community. In April of 1861, a crowd of citizens raised a rebel flag on the east side of the courthouse lawn in Warsaw. However, 2 months later, the state of Missouri would join the conflict on the side of the Union, even though Missouri was primarily composed of Confederate sympathizers, a volatile situation for sure. With Benton County's long history of native conflicts, vigilante groups, and Civil War battles, it's of little surprise that numerous people have described having seen long-dead spirits roaming throughout the area. At the heart of the county, Warsaw has long been a crossroads where people have passed through on wagon trains, stagecoaches, and steamboats. And among military formations of the Union and Confederate armies. Reports of these long-dead soldiers walking the streets continue within the town limits and along the shores of the lakes today. One of these spirits seems to have a portion of his torso missing, suggesting that the man may have met a sudden and violent end in the bloody conflict.
That sounds like a cannibal.
Yeah. Warsaw doesn't have a monopoly on the area's Civil War ghosts, as more soldiers haunt the community of Lincoln, about 13 miles north. At the Bledsoe Ferry public use area, an old skipper has often been seen wandering the waterfront. Though his identity is unknown, he seems angry to be there. Perhaps it's because he's stranded without the boat that he used to navigate the area's waters so many years ago. And then there's a series of bizarre spectral women that have been seen across the area as well. There's a woman with a knife in her head that has been spotted riding a horse along a local highway. There's also a young woman in a bloody dress that wanders amongst the graves in the old cemetery on the edge of town. And then there's a woman wreathed in flames and another described as a sorceress that add a particularly supernatural tone to the landscape. To the northeast of Warsaw, at the small Kyle Lake Dam, a lumberjack wielding a large axe has frightened several witnesses over the years, usually appearing near the midnight hour. Now, I would also be a bit unsettled by the appearance of an axe-wielding man, whether he be alive or dead, in the middle of the night. A coal camp just a little further to the north, a long-dead aircraft pilot has often been seen near a stream in the early morning hours. Many believe this to be the spirit of a former coal camp resident who failed to safely make it back to the airfield one day. He seems bitter about his fate, as he has been known to throw rocks and other debris at those who get too close. And these are just a few of the spirits that have been reported in this county at the center of Missouri, a collection that is just as motley as the history of the region, a land where the spirits of the previous generations are seemingly just as numerous as those who call Benton County home today.
Sounds like it's a place for a paranormal investigation weekend.
Yes, sir. What are you doing?
I'm getting into anything and everything I shouldn't.
You were sleeping like 20 minutes ago.
I'm recharged.
Yeah, clearly.
So Alex and Patrick at the same time posted why it's called the
Show Me State?
Show Me State.
Did you read it?
I did, but it's further up.
According to the all-knowing Google, thank you, Patrick, the Joplin miners were unfamiliar with Colorado mining methods and required frequent instructions. Pit bosses began saying, "That man is from Missouri. You'll have to show him." The Show Me State.
Okay.
Okay. And... oh, and Sasha's mother lives in Benton County.
So, has Sasha's mother ever had experiences?
Oh, and Alex seconded Patrick's assessment of the Show Me State. So, good deal. Thank you, folks. But yeah, Sasha, if your mother has had any interesting experiences in Benton County herself, drop a note in the chat. Love to hear about it.
Mm-hmm. All right, so we're going to move on to Independence, Missouri, and the Vaile Mansion. This is just on the east side of Kansas City, and perhaps best known as the home for the 33rd President Harry S. Truman. However, this community's heritage goes far beyond the presidential legacy. Founded in 1827, Independence is known as the Queen City of the Trails, and it was a major point of departure for settlers heading to the west. It's also important to the Mormon religion as Temple Lot, the first site to be dedicated to the construction of the Latter-day Saint Temple, and of course, now located there. Amongst these high-profile historic features, there are many other sites of note as well, including the Vaile Mansion, which is located just a few blocks away from the Harry S. Truman Presidential Library and Museum. The Vaile Mansion was a beautiful Victorian home that was built in 1881, with 31 rooms, 9 marble fireplaces, beautifully painted ceilings, a black walnut grand staircase, and so many other amazing features, both beautiful and practical. It is quite a draw for the history and architectural lovers, but that was not always the case. Though this old building has no accounts of recent hauntings, it's said that at one time it was so ominous that a passerby would cross the street rather than walk in front of the old home. It was built by a Colonel and Mrs. Harvey Vaile, and it was intended to be their dream home. But things started to fall apart when Mr. Vaile was accused of mail fraud and potentially faced a jail sentence. The despondent Mr. Vaile began to deteriorate and went a little crazy. Excuse me, I have a...
There's cats.
I have a request. There you go. Now, Mrs. Vaile, mortified over the accusations, took an overdose of morphine and killed herself in 1889. Sir? Thank you. You don't need to demonstrate why you're your nickname. Anyway, I lost my spot. Later, Mr. Vaile was exonerated, but alas, it was too late for his wife. Mr. Vaile lived for another 5 years and would never remarried. The mansion was reportedly haunted by Sophia Vaile, as she was often reported having been seen looking out the windows after her death. According to one legend, her husband could not part with her when she died, so he buried her on the front lawn in a glass-topped coffin set flush with the ground. However, the neighborhood protests finally forced him to give his wife a more conventional burial. The key word in that claim is legend, as curators of the historic site vehemently deny any such atypical burial ever took place on property. But the rumors still persist. After Mr. Vaile died in 1894, the home became an inn for a brief period and then was used as private asylum and sanatorium. A mineral water company, the Vaile Pure Water Company, operated from the site soon after the turn of the century, later becoming a rest home for the aged. Acquired by Roger and Mary Mildred DeWitt in the 1960s, the home was saved from destruction. It was given to the citizens of Independence after the death of Mrs. DeWitt in 1983. While the Vailes have long since passed into the history books of Independence, the people of the community still remember their tragic story and the bizarre haunting tales associated with the home. Today, people can visit the home and experience the splendor of this gilded aged residence, but don't be surprised if you feel a spirited gaze on you as you explore the rooms and halls that the Vailes called home about 140 years ago. Yes. You did ask if the cats are going to be part of the show.
Oh, they are very much part of the show tonight. Aren't you?
We're just going to keep trading with the cats. Oh, I'm sorry, buddy. Your brother wants to play with it.
Oh, boy. Anyways. I don't... So, let's see. Rick mentioned there's a Wilson's Creek battlefield that has a good number of hauntings there.
Okay.
So, I'm not sure if that's in one of the feature scripts.
I don't remember if I touched upon any battlefields. There might be. It also might be in our military one, too.
Yeah.
Because we have a whole military script that I haven't even touched.
Yes. So we have quite the library.
Yes, we do.
Both physically and digitally, so...
My Pinterest page is overflowing.
Yeah. But my mother says that the real stars of the show are stealing the thunder tonight.
Of course they are.
Of course they are. So, this next story, this is an interesting one. And I have to say, I'm kind of tempted to take this story with a little bit of grain of salt. It was a first-hand account of a incident, or one particular kind of series of incidents the person had in what is known as the Fear House, or the Screaming House. And
I just had to because of the name.
In the city of Union. Now, I actually found like the address for this place. I'm not going to read the address. You can honestly look it up easy enough if you are so inclined. I don't want to be that person though. And yeah, the place looks, you know, I don't know. There's something to it. Anyways, the city of Union is just to the southwest of St. Louis. So it's not too far from St. Louis. And it's tucked away in an unassuming residential street. There is this unassuming house that most would just simply pass by without a second thought. However, this house harbors a terrifying story that has since been cemented into the paranormal lore of the American Midwest. And this house has been talked about at length by many, many people. So, been investigated up one side and down the other, and some of the stories that have come out of here are just... I got chills as I was editing this story.
It's not a house. It's like part of me wants to go to it, but the other part of me is like, are you insane? Yeah,
it's definitely tempting fate. So let's go ahead. Let's have a little talk about the Fear House. And what I'm about to go ahead and bring to you here is the account that was shared by a former tenant of the house by the name of Stephen LaChance. And he shared his experience after having been lured into the home by a rental rate that seemed too good to be true. And spoiler alert, it was. So, despite getting a steal on the rental, there were a few odd things about the place when Stephen moved in. All of the doors had latches on the outside with no discernible explanation. And then little things started to happen. A painting kept falling off the wall. Odd, but okay. But then a ghostly apparition started showing up. Then a screaming man, followed swiftly by a supernatural assault on the home, which ultimately forced Stephen from the house. Turns out the house has a long history of tenants leaving unexpectedly, and Stephen was just its latest victim. But we are getting a little ahead of ourselves here. Stephen's story started in May of 2001. He needed to find a place for himself and his 3 children after his lease was up at the apartment where they had lived for 2 years. He was a single father and about to find himself and his children homeless. One evening he received a call from a woman telling him about the house. She said it was a rather large old house in perfect shape. She invited Stephen to an open house that was to be held the coming Sunday. Stephen and his daughter arrived at the large white house and were greeted by the smell of baking cookies. They were surprised at the beautiful interior with original woodwork, a large kitchen, and 3 bedrooms on the 2nd floor. Moving past the living space, the basement had an old butcher's shower and a fruit cellar. This says nothing of the outdoor space that the property also offered. It was a dream come true for the desperate family. Stephen filled out the rental application and the landlady asked, "You understand the responsibility of living in an old house like this?" Stephen didn't think too much of the question and quickly answered, "Oh yes, I understand. It's beautiful." It would be fair to say that he didn't fully comprehend what he had just agreed to. As Stephen went on with his day, he thought about the landlady and how she was a touch odd. He recalled that she acted more like she was showing off a museum rather than a house that was up for rent. Still, Stephen was excited about the prospect of living in the home. A week later, the landlady called to schedule an appointment to finish the rental paperwork. Stephen was a little surprised that she chose a restaurant for the meeting rather than his soon-to-be home, but he went along with it all the same. After taking care of the formalities, they were set to move in on the following weekend. Moving day started off normally enough, and before they knew it, their belongings were safely inside the old white house. Stephen was removing the last few items from the moving truck when a car slowed down, almost stopping. And from the window of the slow-moving car, the passenger said, "Hope you get along okay here," and then sped up and drove away. Stephen and his daughter were a bit puzzled, but dismissed it as an unusual way of saying, "Welcome to the neighborhood." If only that were the case. The first night in the house went by without fanfare, and the next morning started most like any other day, except this is when Stephen first took note of those unusual latches. Each of the house's interior doors had an old-fashioned hook and eye latch, but not on the inside of each door to keep someone out. The latches were on the outside of the room's doors as if to keep something in. The first truly unusual incident happened in the living room when Stephen was hanging a large picture of 2 angels. He hung up the picture and turned to walk away. Crash! The picture had fallen to the floor. Stephen tried again, but the picture again crashed to the floor. Hanging it for a 3rd time, Stephen felt a rush of air when he started walking away, and something hit the back of his ankles. He turned to see the picture lying at his feet. Determined not to let a picture get the better of him, he hung it up again and yelled at it to stay where it was, but ultimately laughed at himself for trying to scold a picture while standing in a room by himself. From the front porch, Stephen's daughter called for his attention. He stepped outside and his daughter excitedly told him, "Sit down and watch this." She then pointed to an old man walking down the sidewalk toward the house. However, when he reached the property line, he quickly crossed the street and walked on the opposite sidewalk. She said, "They don't like walking in front of our house, Dad. Isn't that weird?" Stephen sat on the porch for 3 hours, watching the neighbors cross the street from his house whenever they walked along the street. A couple of times he motioned as if to say hello, but they just dropped their heads and continued at a brisker pace. Stephen thought, maybe they are uncomfortable with new neighbors? Trying to make sense of the senseless situation. After the weird afternoon, the family retired inside for dinner and an uneventful evening. On Sunday, the family went to church and returned home to work on the yard. A big deal for the family because their previous apartment had only had a front balcony. They mowed the grass and cleaned the leaves from under the porch and in the front yard. Despite being May, the trees seemed to be shedding their leaves as if it were fall. Strange, but that didn't change the fact of the matter. Stephen sent his youngest son to go bring out the garden hose from the basement so they could clean out the walkways and wash down the weathered white of the house. A few moments passed, and then the boy could be heard screaming from inside the house. Running frantically into the house, Stephen found him standing in the kitchen, shaking in the middle of a puddle of urine. Asking what was wrong, the boy replied, "Something chased me up the basement steps." Thinking it was the overactive imagination of a little boy, Stephen asked him what it was. His son replied, "I don't know, Daddy, but it was big." The family checked the basement together, but found nothing except the garden hose that had been dropped during the youngest's frightened escape. With the exception of some light teasing by the boys' siblings, the rest of Sunday and Monday went without any other incidents. The family was happily settling into their new home, but the peace wouldn't last for long. The last week of school arrived for the kids, and it was a long work week for Stephen. Each day they would leave the house and return each evening to find every light in the house turned on. Stephen blamed the children for leaving the lights on in the morning, but on Friday morning he went through the home with his daughter, ensuring that every light was off while the boys waited in the car. That night they returned home to again find every light burning. Stephen was a little shaken. There was no logical reason for all of the lights to be on other than someone entering their house while they were gone. He searched the house in a panic, but found nothing. His panic edged higher as his daughter called from the living room, "Daddy, it's cold in here." But what was she talking about? Stephen was sweating from searching the home, but when he entered the living room himself, he felt the temperature plummet to what felt like 30 degrees. That was the first time Stephen felt its presence. It felt like an electrical current running through his body, bringing tears to his eyes and bumps to his arms. It passed quickly, but Stephen couldn't help but to think, what the hell was that? Soon after, his daughter said, "Daddy, it's getting warm in here." And sure enough, the temperature was rising as Stephen watched the thermostat climb. That night, the children slept in Stephen's room, but sleep eluded Stephen. On Sunday night, the family was sitting in the living room talking. Stephen was getting ready to take a trip to Indianapolis for work, and they were discussing the kids' plans for a stay at Grandma's. The kids had their backs to the living room, but Stephen got a perfect view of what came next. He noticed it first out of the corner of his eye, a quick glance. Standing at the kitchen doorway leading into the family room, something was moving. Not something, someone. He looked toward it again and made out the dark figure of a man, even though there was full light. He was solid in form, except there was a moving, churning, dark gray, black smoke or mist that made up his form. Stephen tried to gather himself, looking away and telling himself that his eyes were playing tricks on him. After a moment sufficiently settled, Stephen looked again, but sure that the figure would be gone, but he was still there, and he began to move again. Moving into the family room and pausing in the center, the form was still a churning mass, churning blackness. He stood there for what seemed like an eternity, but it was only a few moments before he melted into the air. The moment was seared into Stephen's mind. He remembered thinking, "I have two choices. We could run out of the house screaming into the night like those crazies you always see in the movies. You know, the ones that are always based on fact. Or the other choice, we could get up quietly, leave the house, and figure all of this out." His hands were shaking uncontrollably, but he managed to move forward with option 2. Standing on shaky legs, Stephen said in his calmest daddy voice, "Let's go get a soda and see Grandma." The youngest was instantly excited at the prospect of a soda before bed, and the older two looked at Stephen as if he had lost his mind. A little further coaxing, "Come on, guys, it'll be fun." Thankfully, the car keys were on the coffee table in front of them. They moved orderly out the front door, and Stephen turned to lock the door when a loud, painful scream of a man came from inside the house. It sounded as if he was screaming in pain, so loud that it could be heard throughout the neighborhood, and the dogs began to bark. Any lingering idea of remaining orderly was shattered. Stephen let loose with his own scream, "Get in the car." They jumped into the car, with Stephen intending to drive to his mother's house. Though Stephen recalls little of those panic-stricken moments, there is one terrifying thing that he remembers clearly. As they started to pull away from the home-turned nightmare, Stephen's youngest son, in a terrified voice, said, "Daddy, the basement monster is standing in the upstairs window." Stephen looked back and saw the black form standing in the window, watching them leave. The family stayed at Stephen's parents' house that night. But the next morning, Stephen still needed to leave for his trip. He left the kids with his parents, as was already the plan, and departed for business. though that was the furthest thing from his mind. Where would they go? Stephen had put everything he had into the move. They had no choice but to return to the old white house. Besides, after a week of talking himself down, Stephen was ready to return. On Friday night, they returned to the house. The weekend went by without incident, though sleep was hard to come by. On Saturday, the family explored the big shed at the back of the yard, and in it they found several personal belongings that appeared to belong to different people. Stephen's parents convinced him that maybe it would be a good idea to call the strange old landlady and ask her some straightforward questions about the house. As far as awkward and strange phone calls go, it was one for the ages. Stephen chose his words carefully and asked if any of the previous tenants had ever mentioned a ghost. Of course, she said at first that she could not remember. However, she went on to say that one female tenant had claimed that her dead father had come to visit her, but the old woman always thought that she was crazy. The landlady said that the girl had left behind some of the stuff in the shed, but she couldn't get her to come and pick it up. The other stuff in the shed evidently belonged to a man who had lived there but left in the middle of the night, leaving behind his things. But no, she had never heard of anyone talking about the house being haunted. Stephen asked her how long ago did these people live there, and she said, "Not much more than a year, honey. Why do you ask?" The phone call wasn't of much help, but what else could Stephen do? The rest of the weekend came and went. Stephen had convinced himself that it was just a one-time ordeal because nothing more was happening. That was until Monday night. Stephen was on the phone with his mother. The kids were off playing in his bedroom on the first floor. While on the phone, Stephen began to hear the inside doors rattling, and his first instinct was to yell to the kids to cut it out. But then the doors rattled again, this time harder. So Stephen then yelled louder, but
So Stephen then yelled louder, but the doors only rattled louder. Before Stephen could say anything, his eldest daughter, in a scared voice, cut him off. "Daddy, I'm in here reading, and my brothers are asleep." Following moments resulted in a jumble of memories. Some things are a blur, but other things Stephen can recall only too well. As soon as Stephen's daughter stopped speaking, the temperature in the house dropped 30 degrees. With it came the feeling of electrical charge running through Stephen's body, and a horrible stench permeated the room. And then the screaming started, softly at first, but building momentum. Stephen, still on the phone with his mother, yelled at her to help the family. The family was getting out. The whole house began to shake and come alive. From above, Stephen could hear something large coming down the stairs. Boom, boom, boom! The screaming of man over and over again. The screaming of his daughter, "Daddy, what's happening?" Boom, boom! Stephen leapt to get his children. The whole house seemed to come alive with noise. The floor was shaking as he approached the bedroom door. He felt something behind him, but he didn't dare turn around. A new scream mixed into the man's scream, this one from a child. Stephen made it to the bedroom door, but it wouldn't open. By this time, Stephen was also screaming, and he threw himself against the door, but it still wouldn't budge. He repeatedly threw himself against the door until finally it slammed open.
Stephen's daughter was in shock at this point, and he instructed his middle son to grab his brother, run out the front door, and head for the car. Stephen had to shake his daughter out of her trance, and then he grabbed her and ran for the door himself. As he did this, he heard the other bedroom door slam open. It was right behind them. The whole house was still shaking and alive with noise, and something right on their heels. They reached the front porch, and Stephen slammed the door shut behind them. As they jumped in the car, the house was still rattling with noise. Stephen drove to the top of the street to wait for his parents. From there, the family could see their home, and the windows revealed the presence moving from room to room, as if searching for them. That was their last night in the house. Stephen's children never returned, and he never entered the home alone again as he went back for some of their belongings. Everyone he brought into the house would also witness something happen. A scream, whispers, pounding from the floor above. It was not selective anymore at who it let hear its fury. On the day that Stephen turned the key back over to the old lady, she said something he would never forget. Some people are meant to live in an old house like that, and some people aren't. I never thought you were the old house type. Seems she was right. About a month after moving out of the old house, a friend of Stephen's sent him an internet link to search for John T. Crow, Union, Missouri. The face of a man popped up on the Stephen's screen. It was the same face that showed up in a picture that his brother had taken in the fruit cellar one afternoon while packing up to leave. The man and this inconspicuous plot of land were infamous. The Screaming House was built upon land which was owned by Captain T. Crow. Captain Crow was the first captain of the 1st Missouri Militia in the Civil War. He lived on the property with his wife, Minerva, until shortly after her untimely death. The Screaming House was built in 1932 and was placed upon the spot which once held slave quarters. There is talk of Minerva having improper relations with at least one of the enslaved people, which may have led to her death and the subsequent deaths of all the young male slaves on the property. An atrocity that has resulted in more questions than answers. In the aftermath of the carnage, Captain Crow sold the land and moved to Beaufort, Missouri, where he spent the rest of his years. As for the house today, the old lady turned it into a dog kennel some time ago, and apparently she ran out of people that could live in the old house.
I don't think the dogs will fare any better.
No.
They're sensitive.
Yep. But I did find pictures of the place, and it is, by all accounts, still standing there. This old house.
No.
No.
We will not be adopting a dog from that location.
No. The one, I don't think we'll be adopting a dog anytime soon.
No.
But, yeah.
As I get snuggled even more.
What I did notice is that earlier they were talking about the tree that was shedding its leaves in May, like it was fall. That tree, I found it in a picture, an old picture of the place. It has apparently long since been removed.
Okay.
So it may have been a sick tree to begin with, but it was very much encroaching on the house. It was like just feet from the front porch. So.
Not good in a storm.
Yep, but aside from that tree having been removed, the house very much looks the same that apparently it did 20 years ago.
We're not visiting it.
Okay. I'm not going to argue with you on this one.
Yep.
Can I have your...
Yes, you can. Now
Thank
that
you.
somebody has settled.
Yeah, we'll see how long that lasts.
All right, we're going to go to Missouri State Penitentiary. This is one of the grimmest corners of Missouri, called the bloodiest 47 acres in America. And of course, the Missouri State Penitentiary is in Jefferson City. Now, Jefferson City became the capital of Missouri in 1822, but in the next decade, there were other towns that were vying for the opportunity to take that status for themselves. Jefferson City needed something to ensure that it would remain the capital city, and Governor John Miller came up with the solution in 1831 when he proposed the construction of a maximum security state penitentiary. The prison was authorized by the Missouri legislature the next year, and construction began in 1834. It was opened in 1836. Initially, it housed just 15 prisoners who worked in a shop making bricks. The prison, nicknamed the Walls, was fully completed. It was surrounded by the high limestone wall with 15 guard towers. Before long, 2,000 men were incarcerated at the penitentiary, which would be the average number of inmates per year. Pardon! Early on, the penitentiary operated a lease program where businessmen could hire inmates to work for them. Several buildings in Jefferson City, including the first Capitol, the governor's mansion, and several area homes, were built using prison labor. In 1868, Housing Unit 4, or Hall A, was built to house post-Civil War criminals. Construction of stone quarried on site and built by mainly the inmates, it was in continuous use until the day the prison was closed. The massive stone building is the oldest building in the prison today, and its basement, nicknamed the Hole, was a medieval-style dungeon that housed some of the worst criminals, including those on death row. Over many years, the prison became an industrial site, and by 1885, it housed 6 shoe factories, clothing and broom and twine factories, and the largest saddle tree factory in the world. All were worked by prison labor, and at the turn of the century, the Penitentiary was considered one of the most efficient prisons in the country, and the Jefferson City Star Tribune called it the greatest in the world. I'm sure the prisoners had something to say about that.
Yeah, I think that's all a matter of perspective.
Housing Unit 1 was constructed in 1905 to house female inmates and now serves as the main entrance to the penitentiary. In 1914, the prison was expanded again with the addition of Housing Unit 3, which became the Capital Punishment and Segregation Unit. According to the Department of Justice, the prison housed 4,900 inmates, and in 1936, however, at its highest point, it housed over 5,200 inmates, far more than it was designed to hold, and at this time it held more inmates than any other facility in the country. In 1937, the gas chamber building was built by prisoners using stone from the prison quarry. Before this, executions were conducted by hanging. The new gas chamber would become the location of 40 executions. 39 were executed in the gas chamber, and the final execution was made using lethal injection in 1989. Afterward, prisoners' death row inmates were transferred to the Potsoy Correctional Center in Mineral Point, Missouri. Although many riots, murders, and escape attempts occurred over the years, one of the biggest events in the prison's history occurred when a violent riot broke out in September of 1954. In the previous 2 years, several other prison riots had occurred across the country, and when gossip in the prison turned to talk of riots, authorities took it seriously, drafting a plan that, should such an event occur, training the officers. On the evening of September 22nd, 2 inmates feigned illness, and when 2 guards came to investigate, they were overpowered and 1 was beaten severely. The prisoners then stole their keys, released other prisoners, and before long, hundreds of inmates were running loose throughout the penitentiary, smashing windows and furnishings, and setting fires in the prison shops. By midnight, the Missouri Highway Patrol Police from Kansas City and St. Louis, a National Guardsman, had surrounded the prison. By that time, 4 buildings were on fire, and before it was over, nearly 2,500 rioters were on the loose inside the walls, and the carnage continued throughout the night. The authorities announced to the press that there would be no attempt to secure the cell blocks that night, but rather the lawmen were tasked to prevent a mass breakout. And the early next morning, 18 men were chosen to lead the way into the cell blocks, where about 300 of the rioters were holed up in a foreboding 4-story white stone building. The other armed troopers were on the roof, and over 100 police officers were just standing outside the prison yard as a second wall of defense. The officers on the roof were finally forced to open fire with machine gun and riot guns to remove convicts from the prison yard. In the meantime, the 18 men tasked with going into the prison were heavily armed with riot guns and submachine guns. Upon their entry, they were bombarded with shouting, cursing, and articles being thrown at them. All the windows had been broken out, and the building was filled with 4 inches of standing water. Over the loudspeaker, the convicts were ordered to get into the nearest cell and to be quiet or they would be shot. 1 inmate who ignored the order was killed, and the rest retreated to the cells. Before the building was secured, as many as 9 men were locked away in each cell. It would be mid-afternoon before the rioters were processed and everybody returned to their cells. When it was over, 4 inmates had been killed, 1 of whom was in solitary confinement and was tortured and murdered by other prisoners. Another 50 inmates were injured, and 1 attempted suicide. 4 officers were also injured. No inmates were able to escape during the incident. The burned-out hulks of several buildings lay smoldering and damaged, and the damage estimates were to be about $5 million. The riot had started and ended in Housing Unit 3. Because of this violence in the penitentiary, it was called the bloodiest 47 acres in America by Time magazine in 1967. After 168 years of operation, the prison was closed in 2004, and the inmates were moved to a new Jefferson City Correctional Center. During its history, the facility contained as many as 50 buildings. After it closed, the many were raised to make room for federal courthouse and other state buildings. During its long life, thousands of inmates would call the walls home, several of whom were well known. In 1925, one of the prison's most infamous inmates was Charles Arthur Pretty Boy Floyd. He was well known for his widespread bank robberies and his involvement in the Kansas City Massacre. After Blanche Barrow, the Bonnie and Clyde gang was captured in 1933, she was sentenced to 10 years in the prison for assault with intent to kill. However, after being a model prisoner, she was released in 1939. In 1950, Charles Sonny Liston, who would later become a heavyweight boxing champion, was sentenced to time in the Missouri State Penitentiary for armed robbery. It was here he learned how to box, and after about a year after his release in 1952, he became a professional boxer, and in 1953 won the National Heavyweight Championship. James Earl Ray was imprisoned here in 1959 for repeated offenses of burglary. He escaped in 1967 by hiding in a truck, and while he was still at large, he assassinated civil rights leader Martin Luther King Jr. in Memphis, Tennessee on April 4th of 1968. He was soon apprehended and sent to prison in Tennessee. After the prison closed, it fell into disrepair before reopened as a tourist attraction, offering history and paranormal tours. Sometimes these tours are led by former inmates and guards. And nearly 100 years older than Alcatraz, it comes as no surprise that the structure is said to be home to several resident ghosts, and numerous paranormal events have been reported here throughout the years. Tales of ghostly visitors have long before the prison closed, with both prisoners and guards reporting having seen apparitions. A Hall, the prison's oldest building, is said to be a hot spot of unearthly activity. Inside the massive stone building are 4 tiers of cells with catwalks that crisscross its width. The doors of the cells are less than 5 feet high, which force prisoners to stoop down and take a subordinate posture when leaving their cells. In this building, the paranormal reports have included the feeling of having been touched by ghostly hands, an overwhelming smell of body odor, an apparition of a man spied on the catwalk, and movements in the darkness. Equipment often malfunctions here, and disembodied voices have been captured on recorders. Some have even felt an invisible force breathing down their necks. In cell number 48, once housed a prisoner who was known to be a snitch. He was bludgeoned to death with a sledgehammer during the prison riot of 1954. Here, people have reported having strange, heavy feelings, and an unearthly human figure has been caught on camera. Near the control room and in some of the housing units, it's said to lurk an entity known as Fast Jack. Usually spied wearing what looks like a white lab coat, carrying a clipboard, he is thought to have been a trustee who worked in the medical facilities. At one point, a tour guide passed through the control center to secure the outer doors, only to return just a few minutes later to find all the lockers had been opened. The disturbance was attributed to Fast Jack. Others report him as having been seen in the hallways, moving through the walls or appearing for short moments before vanishing. In the female wing, a female ghostly figure is seen dressed in vintage clothing. Others have seen a man in outdated prison uniform leaning against the fence. And strangely, some have seen or heard the ghosts of children, and others even a dog. Throughout the old facilities, people have heard cell doors slamming, ghostly footsteps, loud banging, shadowy figures, the smell of cigarette smoke, objects being mysteriously moved around, and fast-moving entities. They also report having felt dread, a sense of sorrow, and the feeling of being watched. Today, the Gothic-style Missouri Penitentiary ranks as one of the most incredible haunted prisons in the country, along with Eastern State Penitentiary in Pennsylvania, Ohio State Reformatory, and the West Virginia Penitentiary. Yes, sir, what are you doing? Please tell me you're not showing your bum.
No.
What?
So I was just sitting here with Nico, and all of a sudden a bubble formed above my head on Facebook. Did it? It was nothing paranormal.
Like a talk bubble?
Yes, but yeah.
Okay.
But I don't know what that was about.
Is that a new update, Facebook?
I don't know. I definitely didn't ask for that. It looked goofy as all get out.
I can't wait to go back and look at the replay.
Anyways, yeah. So, Alex said they were there for business a few years back, and they ate at a place called Prison Brews, which is just a couple blocks away. And apparently, well, it's prison themed, and you sit in booths that are actually like jail cells.
Huh.
Yeah. Interesting theming idea. I'll give them credit for that.
Yeah.
So, but Ah, Mr. Nico, you've been quite the character. So, and earlier in the chat, I know I did not comment on this because we were getting here. Rick mentioned the Lemp Mansion.
We're finishing with that.
We're finishing with the Lemp Mansion tonight.
Because we couldn't do this and not mention it.
Yeah. And of course, we did have to make at least one stop in St. Louis tonight.
Yes.
Because, well, St. Louis, Missouri, I mean, we had to make one stop there.
It's got the arch. You have to go there. It's where Bush is. It's where Lemp Brewery is. You had to go there.
Yeah. So, this final stop, St. Louis, the gateway to the west, as it is known. And it's here in the Benton Park neighborhood, just blocks from some of the historic breweries that helped to make St. Louis world famous, stands the Lemp Mansion. Over the years, the mansion, which started as the home of millionaires, has seen turns as office space and a run-down boarding house, before getting restored to its original grandeur, now offering a fine dinner theater, a restaurant, and a bed and breakfast. The Lemp family began with Johann Adam Lemp, who...
Sorry.
Thank you.
I was trying to look at the comments, Will.
Okay.
Sorry.
The Lemp family began with Johann Adam Lemp, who arrived in St. Louis from Germany in 1838. Building a small grocery store, he sold everyday household items, groceries, and homemade beer. The light golden lager was a welcome change from the darker beers that were sold at the time. The recipe was handed down by his father and was so popular that just 2 years later, he gave up the grocery store and built a small brewery in 1840 at a point close to where the Gateway Arch stands today. Lemp first sold his beer in a pub attached to the brewery, introducing St. Louis to its first lager. Before long, Lemp had found that the brewery was too small to handle the production and storage and found a limestone cave south of the city limits. That cave, located at the present-day corner of Cherokee and DeMille Place, could be kept cool by chopping ice from the nearby Mississippi River and depositing it inside, providing perfect conditions for the lagering process to run its course. Lemp's Western Brewing Company continued to prosper and by the 1850s was one of the largest in the city. In 1858, the beer captured first place at the annual St. Louis Fair. A millionaire by the time of his death, Lemp died on August 25, 1862, and his son, William, began a significant expansion of the brewery. He purchased a 5-block area around the storage house on Cherokee and above the lagering caves. In 1864, a new plant was completed at Cherokee Street in Carandolte, something avenue. We're going to go with that. The brewery eventually covered 5 city blocks by continuously expanding to meet the product demand. By the 1870s, the Lemp family symbolized wealth and power as the Lemp Brewery controlled the St. Louis beer market, a position it maintained until Prohibition. In 1868, Jacob Feckert, William Lemp's father-in-law, built a house a short distance from the Lemp Brewery. In 1876, William Lemp purchased it for his family, utilizing it as a residence and an auxiliary office. While the home was impressive, Lemp immediately began renovating and expanding the 33-room house into a Victorian showplace. From the mansion, a tunnel was built from the basement through the caves to the brewery. When mechanical refrigeration became available, parts of the cave were converted for other purposes, including a natural auditorium and a theater. This underground oasis would later spawn a large concrete swimming pool with hot water piped in from the brewery boiling house and a bowling alley. By the middle of the 1890s, the Lemp Brewery gained a national presence after introducing the popular Falstaff beer, which another company still brews today. The Lemp Western Brewery was the first brewer to establish coast-to-coast distribution of its beer. At the same time, he was building his own business empire. William Sr. also helped Pabst, Anheuser, and Busch get started. Amid this success, the Lemp family experienced the first of many tragedies when Frederick Lemp, William Sr.'s favorite son and heir apparent, died in 1901 at the age of 28. Frederick, who had never been in excellent health, died of heart failure. The devastated William Lemp was never the same, began a slow withdrawal. He was rarely seen publicly after his son's death. On January 1st, 1904, William's closest friend, Frederick Pabst, yes, PBR fans, that Pabst, also died, leaving William indifferent to the details of running the brewery. Though he arrived at the office daily, he was nervous and unsettled. His physical and mental health began to decline, and on February 13, 1904, he shot himself in the head with a .38 caliber Smith & Wesson. In November of 1904, William Lemp Jr. took over as the new president of the William J. Lemp Brewing Company. Inheriting the family business and a vast fortune, he and his wife Lillian began to spend their inheritance. Filling the house with servants, the pair spent vast amounts on carriages, clothing, and art. Lillian was a beautiful woman who came from a wealthy family herself. She and William Lemp Jr. had married in 1899, and William J. Lemp III was born on September 26th of 1900. Before long, Lillian became known as the Lavender Lady because of her fondness for the color. In addition to her lavender attire and accessories, she went so far as to have her carriage horse harnesses dyed lavender. Initially, William enjoyed showing off his trophy wife, but Will was a bit of a player. Born with a silver spoon in his mouth, he was used to doing and acting as he pleased. When William began to tire of his beautiful wife, he demanded she spend her time shopping, allotting her $1,000 a day. He gave her an ultimatum that she would get no more if she didn't spend it. Definitely just wanted her out of the way. Anyways, in the meantime, Will was busy running the brewery during the day and pursuing all manner of decadent activities during the night. Holding lavish parties in the caves below the mansion, he would bring in numerous ladies of the night for the entertainment of his friends. Enjoying the swimming pool, the bowling alley, and the free-flowing beer, his friends who attended these lavish events were known to enjoy a high time in the earth below. Will's shenanigans caught up with him when he had a son with a woman other than his wife. Today, there is no official documentation that this boy existed. However, the rumors that this boy was hidden in the mansion attic for his entire life have been prevalent over the years. According to St. Louis historian Joe Gibbons, when he interviewed a former nanny and a chauffeur who worked at the mansion long ago, they verified that the boy existed and was housed in the attic quarters that also housed the servants' rooms. It was said that the boy was born with Down syndrome, a condition that the callous Lemp family was unwilling to deal with, so he was hidden away and only acknowledged in cruel whispers. This unfortunate soul continues to show his presence at the Lemp mansion from time to time today. Finally, William Jr. tired of his trophy wife and filed for divorce in 1908. The court proceedings surrounding the divorce became a major St. Louis scandal, with all four St. Louis newspapers devoting extensive front-page coverage to the messy affair. The trial opened in February of 1909 to crowds that flocked to the courthouse each day to witness the drama of tales of violence, drunkenness, and cruelty. Virtually ignoring William's decadent activities, Lillian almost lost custody of her son because of a photograph presented at the trial that showed her smoking a cigarette. Ultimately, she retained custody of William III, but soon retired from the public eye. The only time she was ever seen wearing anything other than lavender was on the final day of her divorce proceedings, when she appeared entirely in black before the judge. With the divorce, Will's troubles had only just begun. In 1906, 9 large breweries in the St. Louis area had combined to form the Independent Breweries Company, creating fierce competition that the Lemp Brewery had never faced before. In the same year, Will's mother died of cancer. Though the brewery's fortunes were continuously declining, the Lemp Mansion was entirely remodeled in 1911 and partially converted into offices for the brewery. At the same time, William allowed the company's equipment to deteriorate without keeping abreast of industry innovations. By World War I, the brewery was barely limping along. William soon built a country home on the Merrimack River, to which he increasingly retreated. In 1915, he married for a second time to Ellie Lindbergh, the widowed daughter of the late St. Louis brewer Caspar Kohler. Then Prohibition came along in 1919. The individual family members were already wealthy, so there was little incentive to keep the brewery afloat. For a time, Will hoped the Congress would repeal Prohibition, but finally gave up and closed the Lemp plant down without notice. When they came to work one day, the workers learned of the closing and found the doors shut and the gates locked. On March 20th of 1920, Elsa Lemp Wright, William's sister, the wealthiest heiress in St. Louis, shot herself just like her father had years before. Elsa was said to have been despondent over her rocky marriage. Liquidating the plant's assets and auctioning the buildings, William Jr. sold the famous Lemp Falstaff logo to brewer Joseph Gressedick for $25,000 in 1922. The brewery buildings were sold to the International Shoe Company for $588,000, a fraction of its estimated worth of $7 million in the years before Prohibition. After the end of the Lemp's brewing dynasty, William Jr. slipped into a depression. Acting much like his father, he became increasingly nervous and erratic, shunning public life and often complaining of ill health. On December 29, 1922, William shot himself in the heart with a .38 caliber revolver in the very same building where his father had died 18 years before. William Jr. took his life on the main level of the mansion, just inside the entrance to the left. At the time of his death, this room served as his office. He was interred in the family mausoleum at Bellefontaine Cemetery in the crypt just above his sister Elsa. William's brothers, Charles and Edwin, had long ago left the family business. So with William Jr. gone, it seemed that the Lemp empire had finally ended. Edwin had entered into a life of seclusion at his estate in Kirkwood, Missouri. Charles had never been involved in the brewery and had chosen to work in the banking and real estate fields instead. In 1943, yet another tragedy occurred when William Lemp III died of a heart attack at the age of 42. Charles eventually remodeled the mansion back into a residence and lived in the house along with two servants and the illegitimate child of his brother. Charles, too, became an odd figure as he grew older, developing a morbid fear of germs. His obsessive-compulsive behavior included always wearing gloves to avoid bacteria and constantly washing his hands. During this time, William's illegitimate child, now in his 30s, died at the mansion. He was buried on the Lemp Cemetery plot with only a small, flat marker with the word Lemp. Shortly after the boy's death, Charles became the fourth member of the Lemp family to commit suicide. First, he shot his beloved Doberman Pinscher in the mansion's basement. Then, climbing the staircase to his room on the second floor, he shot himself. Charles was discovered on May 10, 1949, by one of his staff, still holding a .38 caliber Army Colt revolver in his right hand. Of the Lemps, only Edwin Lemp, who had long avoided the life that had turned so tragic for the rest of his family, remained. He lived out his quiet life of seclusion, passing away quietly from natural causes at the age of 90 in 1970. According to Edwin's last wishes, his butler burned all of the paintings that the Lemps had collected throughout his life and priceless Lemp family documents and artifacts. These irreplaceable pieces of history vanished into the smoke of a blazing bonfire. The Lemp family line died out with him. After the death of Charles Lemp, the mansion was sold and turned into a boarding house. The building began to deteriorate along with the nearby neighborhood, and the haunting tales began. Residents complained of ghostly knocks and phantom footsteps being heard throughout the house. As these stories spread, tenants were hard to find for the boarding house, and it continued to decline to a near flophouse status. However, in 1975, the old mansion was saved when Dick Pointer and his family purchased it. Immediately, they renovated the building, turning it into a restaurant and inn. Workers within the house often told stories of apparitions, strange sounds, vanishing tools, and a feeling of being watched. Frightened by the hauntings, many would leave the job site, never to return. Since the restaurant opened, staff members have reported several strange experiences. Again, apparitions appear and then quickly vanish. Voices and sounds come from nowhere. and glasses will often lift off the bar, flying through the air by themselves. On other occasions, doors are said to lock and unlock by themselves. Lights inexplicably turn on and off of their own free will, and the piano bar often plays when no one is near. Said to be haunted by several members of the Lemp family, there are 3 areas of the old mansion that have the most activity: the stairway, the attic, and what the staff refers to as the gates of hell in the basement. This area of the basement used to be the entrance to the caves running below the mansion and the brewery. The attic is said to be haunted by William Jr.'s illegitimate son. This poor soul spent his entire life locked away in the attic of the Lemp mansion. Strange occurrences are often witnessed on this 3rd floor level of the mansion. The face of the boy has regularly been seen from the street, peeking from the small windows of the mansion. Ghost investigators have often left toys in the middle of the room, drawing a circle around them to see if the objects have been moved. When they return the next day, the toys are consistently found in another location. Many women have reported a man peeking over the stall in the downstairs women's bathroom, which was once William Jr.'s personal domain and held the first freestanding shower in St. Louis. On one such occasion, a woman emerged from the bathroom, returned to the bar, and told the 2 men she was there with, "I hope you got an eyeful." However, the 2 men quickly denied ever leaving the bar, which the bartender verified. This ghost is said to be that of the womanizing William Jr. In William Lemp Sr.'s room, guests have often reported hearing someone running up the stairs and kicking at the door. When William killed himself, William Jr. was known to have run up the stairs to his father's room and, finding it locked, began to kick the door in to get to his father. Several years ago, a part-time tour guide reported hearing the sounds of horses outside the room where William Lemp Sr. had kept his office. However, nothing was there when the tour guide looked through the window. This area north of the mansion, and now used as a parking lot, was once utilized as a tethering lot for horses. All kinds of hauntings at the Lemp Mansion there in the Benton Park neighborhood of St. Louis.
Yep.
And, as we said, a little bit of a longer episode tonight, but that does bring us to a conclusion for this evening.
Yes.
We hope you enjoyed your stories, the stories that we have for you. Let's see, any lingering comments? Oh, yes. I had this thought too, Patrick. Fall of the House of Usher vibes.
Oh, absolutely.
Absolutely. Totally got that from the Lemp story as well when I was reviewing that.
And in 2 weeks, we're going to be doing Haunted Ohio.
Yep. So returning to Ohio, and we did, was it
Cleveland.
Cleveland?
Or was it Columbus?
Columbus. I thought it was Columbus.
It's one of those 2.
Cleveland or Columbus. We did one just on the city.
Yeah.
A few months ago. Now we're going to go a little further afield in the state of Ohio. So we will be doing that in a couple of weeks. Yep, and Falstaff beer is what the Lemp family created. Yep. Also not far from the training grounds for Union General Nathaniel Lyon, a short walk from the Lemp Mansion. So, Rick says that the tour of the Lemp Mansion is worth going to.
Okay.
So, we're eyeing that up ourselves. Coincidentally, which is actually complete coincidence, going to be heading there for a few days. Heading to St. Louis for a few days in April.
Yes.
So, we have had a tendency in the past to, when we go and travel somewhere, to do some stories about a place before we travel there. This was a complete coincidence. So,
yeah. But the Lemp Mansion and Anheuser-Busch Brewery is on my list and your list for the first day when we arrive before any workshops have.
I have day job business there, so you might see.
I will be doing other business stuff there.
Like having fun. Don't lie. You're gonna just go and have fun.
I'm gonna do other business stuff.
You'll go check out some spooky stuff. Maybe share a couple of pictures.
That's called professional development.
Professional. This is true. Professional development.
So I'll be doing other spooky stuff.
Yes.
Other business stuff.
Yeah. So, but anyways, let's see. In the next couple of weeks ahead, So 2 weeks from now, it takes us to February 26th.
Yep.
It'll still be February, so over the next couple of weeks, we actually have quite a few tours going.
We do.
Starting, well, as we already mentioned at the beginning of the show, this Wednesday we have a special, we'll call it for our sake, second Halloween.
Yes.
Arrow to the Heart, special edition of our Churchill tour on Wednesday. And then I think we're doing Churchill again on Thursday. And then we got tours Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. So,
Yep.
Yeah.
Busy.
We got a lot going on. Come on out, see us. Hope that you can come on out and check us out. And if you can't for any reason, that's okay. We hope to, at a minimum, see you back here with us again online 2 weeks from now. As again, we talk about Haunted Ohio.
Yes.
But
with that, we will say au revoir.
Au
And
revoir.
we will catch you on the flip side.
Bonne nuit.
Bonne nuit.
Bonne nuit. Night, everybody.